In this lesson, let's look at configuring a relay connector in Exchange 2013. Now, before we do that, I'm just going to demonstrate the two relay scenarios that we're talking about here. Now, typically, when people think of their SMTP relay requirements in their Exchange org, they're thinking about other systems or devices, so application servers or devices that send SMTP emails, such as network scanners or monitoring systems for data centers. And they need to relay that mail through Exchange to either internal or external recipients. Now, it's important to note that for internal recipients, there's no special configuration or no additional configuration required for that to work. Exchange 2013 is already configured by default to allow any sender to send to an internal recipient. And that is, of course, how email from the internet is sent to internal recipients. But what it won't allow by default is for any sender who is not authenticated to send to external recipients. That would be an open relay, and that would obviously be a bad thing. So let me give you a demonstration of what I mean by both of those. I'm logged onto my domain controller here, and I'm going to open a command prompt. Now, you'll notice that Telnet is not installed on these Windows servers by default. So let's install that now. Okay, so it's just install Windows feature Telnet dash client, no restart required, and what we should find is that Telnet now works. So in our command prompt now, we can telnet to the Exchange server. Now I'm just going to use my existing DNS name of mail.exchangebootcamp.com. You may like to create a DNS alias in your internal DNS, such as smtp.yourdomain.com, or something that's a little bit more obvious or specific to the service that is providing. So I'm just going to use what I've already got, but you might like to create a DNS alias in the real world. So we can telnet to mail.exchangebootcamp.com, and the port number is 25 for SMTP. We do a hello. I'll say mail from and I'll use my test Gmail account. If you make any typos, it's not going to allow you to fix those up using backspace. You'll probably get an error. Just type those out again. You can see that sender of Exchange Server Pro at gmail.com, which is an external sender, was okay. And a recipient of Alex Hayne at exchangebootcamp.com was also okay. So an external sender, unauthenticated, because I'm just connecting with Telnet and I haven't done any authentication for this connection. External sender, unauthenticated to an internal recipient is okay. And we can finish off the message. And we expect that to queue and deliver into Alex's inbox, which I'll just jump over here and confirm. Okay, there it is there. No problems. So what if we tried to relay to an external address using that Gmail account? So I'll go back to the domain controller. Do another hello, and this time we'll say mail from Exchange Server Pro at gmail.com, and I'll just do a receipt to let's say a Hotmail address. And we get an error, unable to relay, which is the correct result. We shouldn't allow an unauthenticated external sender to send to other external recipients. That would be an open relay on our Exchange server. That would be a bad thing. So let's say that we did want to allow open relay for specific hosts within our organization to be able to send email from any sender to any recipient, whether they are internal or external. But we want to do that in a secure way so that only specific IP addresses in our network are able to do that. So let's go over to the Exchange server. And here in the Exchange Admin Center, in the Mailflow section, go to Receive Connectors. Here are the default Receive Connectors that are installed with Exchange automatically. We're going to create a new one, and I'm going to just call it Relay Connector, and I will put my server name into that connector name as well, just to be consistent with the other ones. You might imagine that if you had multiple servers in your organization, that appending the name of the server to the connector would make a lot of sense in those cases. Now we have the option here to bind this connector to either the hub transport or front-end transport services. So this is a multi-role server. It has both hub transport and front-end transport services. The correct choice here is front-end transport. If you bind this to the hub transport service, you'll find that it will actually not work and in fact cause your server to fail. The type of connection is custom, and we can proceed to the next step. This is the bindings, so the IP addresses or interfaces on the local server, the Exchange server that we want to have this receive connector listen on. Now you can usually leave these as just all available IPv4 addresses and port 25. And now we get to specify the remote network settings. So these will be the IP addresses that the connector will receive mail from. Now the default here is basically any IP address anywhere. That's obviously not ideal. We want to take that away. And we want to add in just the IP address, individual IP addresses, but you can also do IP address ranges and subnets for the servers that should be allowed to relay. So the IP address of my domain controller where I'm doing my Telnet tests from is 192.168.0.30. Okay, this needs to have at least one entry in it before we will let you proceed to the next part of the wizard. Click on Finish, and now that relay connector is in place. So now we need to configure some extra settings for the permissions on the receive connector, so it will work the way we want it to. So we can open up the properties of the connector and select security. And the only thing we need to change here is tick the anonymous users tick box. Click Save. And finally, we need to jump into the shell, and we need to grant our anonymous users the right to send to external recipients. So we can use get receive connector, just confirm that I've got the connector name correct there, and we'll pipe that into the add AD permission commandlet. The user that we're adding is in fact NT authority / anonymous logon. We're giving them the extended rights of MS Exchange SMTP accept any recipient. It's pretty obvious what that right will grant them, the ability to send to any recipient. And now we can go back and do our testing again in Telnet. So we'll say mail from test@hotmail.com. Sender is okay. Receipt to Exchange Server Pro at gmail.com. And this time the recipient is okay. So it's allowing an external sender with no authentication to send to an external recipient. So it is in some ways like an open relay, but because we've locked down the remote IP addresses that will be allowed to make these connections and send these emails, it is reasonably secure. And just to prove that that works, we'll go ahead and finish sending that message, and we should expect that to show up in the Gmail inbox within a few moments. Okay, so after a short while that showed up, we can see that I've managed to relay an email from test@hotmail.com to the Exchange Server Pro at gmail.com address, and it's even stamped the disclaimer on there that we set up in the previous lesson. So we know that email has come through our server and been delivered successfully. So that is how you can configure a relay connector in your organization. Remember that this is only required if you are relaying to external recipients from systems that can't perform their own authenticated SMTP connections, or that need to send from an external email address of their own. For other scenarios, such as just sending mail unauthenticated to internal recipients, you don't need to configure a special connector for that scenario.